Yeah, I'm one of your customers.
Jim is out there working the crowd. We're not sure which way he's working them. He's working them up or flattening them down.
Well,
We're honored to have big man with us tonight.
yeah, and Dewey and
Hey, how you doing? See you here. I'm glad you're here.
Walter, right?
Walter, what are you saying? Here for the Belknap?
Yes, sir.
Good. That is here. Good to see you. Get a chance to talk.
yes, sir.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what that's from.
I don't have a crystal ball.
But it's good to have people even who are willing to
I do. I hope so. Something good will come out of it.
Good to meet you, Mr. Layton.
Nice meeting you.
Did we go into executive session? No, when did we go into it? Do you remember?
It was about 22.
Okay.
16 now.
Well, it doesn't start till 7 yet, does it? Oh, is it on the TV here? Oh.
This council is called to order. The invocation pledge of allegiance be led by Mayor Pro Tem Dale Clark.
Let us pray. Our Father, bless this council tonight as we gather to discuss the business of the city. Give us wisdom and insight as we deliberate so that decisions we make will be in the best interest of all our citizens. Bless our troops around the world and our policemen here at home. This we ask in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
The announcement and events be brought to us by Mr. Chuck Barnett. Chuck?
Thank you, Mayor, Council, ladies and gentlemen. The annual Baked Potato and Salad Supper fundraiser is scheduled for this Thursday, May the 15th at the Haltom City Senior Center. Serving will begin at 5 p.m. The cost for this event is $5 per person and desserts will be available. The Crud Cruiser will be in Haltom City on Saturday, May the 24th for collection of household hazardous waste. Hours are 9 to 11 a.m. and the location is at the IESI Convenience Center, which is located at 2120 Menace Drive. Residents must provide proof of residency with their driver's license and recent water bill. In addition, residents may bring personal documents for shredding. There is no charge for disposal of the shredding service. For additional information, please call 817-222-7767. The Haltom City Crime Watch Captains Association, in cooperation with the Tarrant Regional Auto Task Force, has scheduled a VIN etching event for Saturday, May 31st. That is the vehicle identification number. This will occur from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Residents may bring their vehicles to 5600 Denton Highway for this free service to the public. There is still time to submit your entry in the Haltom City Public Library's 8th Annual Texas Writers Month Contest. Categories include short story and poetry. For information and contest guidelines, please contact the library at 817-222-7786. The deadline for this contest is Saturday, May the 31st. And the results are in from this year's Spring Dumpster Day that is held the last Saturday in April. This was the first time the location was moved to the IESI Convenience Center. Number of households participating this year was 202, and the total amount of metal collected for recycling was 4.02 tons. And the total amount of waste collected for disposal was 45.95 tons, almost 46 tons. The amount of electronics collected for recycling, 1,000 pounds. An important announcement is the City Council's second meeting of the month, which be held on Monday, May the 19th, next Monday, instead of our regular scheduled Monday of May 26th. This is due for the city offices being closed in observance of Memorial Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. And next we'll have Mayor Pro Tem Dale Clark is going to give us a few minutes. He served on the 2009 Legislative Policy Committee on Municipal Revenue and Taxation. Very proud of Dale. He went down and to represent Haltom City and is going to have a distinctive voice in what's being considered in the next round of the Texas Legislature starting in January of '09. So Dale, you want to bring us up to date?
Thank you, sir. What we did, about 60 of us went down to Austin for, like I said, TML, and we discussed 30 different taxation issues that may come up in the next legislation starting in January. And we had 4 different choices. We could seek and introduce new legislation and try to get it passed on these particular items, or we could support, which is a little stronger than endorse, or we could oppose. And we went through each one of these, and I think I've handed out all my copies, but the city secretary will have copies of these. And if you go by and get one, remember this is just the summaries. It doesn't really spell out the full page topic that we were given from the attorneys to act upon. And also, while we were down there, I made a presentation on behalf of the mayor. He didn't tell you that he set me up for that. But we went down to discuss the ethics decision that happened on the previous council, I believe around 2000. Pardon me?
Yeah, 2000, was it 2000?
The council approved a bond election, and the firm that they hired put out the literature, and the ethics commission said it was in violation, and it was supportive instead of being just factual. And I made a presentation to them, and they were pretty much in agreement to the point that we formed a subcommittee, which is going to meet again in July, and I'm going to be the chairman of the committee, and we're going to look at bringing this issue in front of the legislation next year and try to get it a little clearly defined and a little bit better for the councils to work with as to what type of language you can use, what type of language you can't use. But I'm looking forward to that, and this is just an update on what we did in Austin. Thank you much.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate that. Next, we've got a couple of presentations. First, we've got this is an Elder Abuse Awareness Month proclamation, and I think Kim Almedo, am I saying it right? Okay, Kim, will you meet me down here? How you doing? Good to meet you. This is Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Whereas people who are elderly or have disabilities have contributed to the general welfare of our community by helping us to preserve customs, convictions, and traditions of many people from diverse backgrounds. And whereas these residents are vital and integral members of our society, and their wisdom and experience have enriched our lives. And whereas abuse of the elderly and people with disabilities in domestic and institutional settings is a widespread problem affecting hundreds of thousands of people across the country. And whereas elder abuse is grossly underreported because the elderly who are being abused find it very difficult to tell anyone and are usually ashamed and sometimes afraid. And whereas elder abuse happens to men and women of all income levels, of all cultural and ethnic groups, whether they are in good health or incapacitated in some way, in poor neighborhoods and in suburbia, now therefore I, William Blandford, Mayor of the City of Haltom City, Texas, do hereby proclaim May 16th, 2008 to be Elder Abuse Awareness Day in Haltom City and urge all citizens to work together and help reduce abuse and neglect of people who are elderly or have disabilities. Kim? Thank you. You say a few words? Speak right in there.
Just on behalf of all the elder people in Tarrant County and in Haltom City, I appreciate your support and your acknowledgement of this serious problem. Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation from our library, Paul Walk. We'll have a library bookmark contest winner. Paul, you want to come up and make your presentation?
I'm Paul Walk with the Haltom City Public Library. I would like to announce the winner of our first annual manga comic art bookmark contest. I briefly would like to mention that our judges included Houston Herlin from the Haltom High School School Library, Todd Humble from the North Richland Hills Public Library, and Linda Evers from the Watauga Public Library. And our winner is here, Brandy Kelly. I'd like to give you the certificate. And also we have a representative from our sponsor, Mike Stover with Lone Star Comics. He would like to give a presentation.
On behalf of the library and Lone Star Comics, I want to hand you this certificate. There's a gift card for $50. Good at Lone Star Comics.
Oh, thanks.
Congratulations.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it and congratulations. I've actually got a book I'm using an old grocery list for right now. I'm having an updated bookmark now. Next up is the consent agenda. Consent agenda is considered to be self-explanatory, will be enacted by the council with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. Approval of the consent agenda authorizes the city manager to implement each item in accordance with staff or board recommendations. Ms. Branson.
Are you ready for a motion?
Well, I see your light on. Is that what? Yeah.
Well, I'm last, yeah. I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Yes, it's a surprise to all of us that you're on the council. Yes. Ms. Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That'll be for a second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion on the dais? Please register your vote. And that is unanimous. That was an inside joke between Diane and I. Yeah, not anymore. I could tell you, but I'd have to kill everybody, you know. So. All right, we're moving on to the regular agenda. Item 9, ordinance number 2008-012-03, consideration and interaction regarding the approval of amending the existing Atmos franchise agreement to provide for a 5% franchise fee. This is the first reading. Mr. Joel Welch, our finance director, will lead us.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. Enclosed in your packet is agenda item number 9, the City Council memorandum. Basically, what's going on with this is that earlier this year, the council ratified a new agreement with Atmos that was negotiated by the Atmos City Steering Committee. It was a coalition of 150 cities that successfully met with and negotiated Atmos's $52 million rate increase package down to $10 million. And included in the agreement was what is admittedly an unusual measure in that Atmos consented to allow all of the cities to, by ordinance, increase the franchise fee percentage from 4% to 5%. That's 4% of gross revenues to 5% of gross revenues. This will enable the city to realize an additional $75,000 to $85,000 a year in annual revenue that will help finance the current operations of the general fund. Basically, if the council chooses to approve this ordinance, this is the first reading of the ordinance, of course, and it'll require 2 readings. We can basically, if we accomplish this prior to June 1st, the new franchise agreement will be effective May 1st. I know I bolded it in y'all's memo because it looks backwards, but it's really not. That is really how it works. And as I mentioned, the primary fiscal impact of the city is that the general fund would recognize approximately $75,000 to $85,000 a year in annual revenue. The cost of the city's operations would be a fairly nominal amount, about $325 per year.
Thanks, sir. Any questions for Joel? Okay. Thank you, Joel. Just stay handy. And Mr. Sutton, you have a question?
Yeah, just a real brief one. Joel, when was the last time that we have received a Atmos rate increase that was approved here in Haltom City?
In terms of franchise fee?
Right.
Certainly long before my time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
It's
you.
been a long time.
All right. Thank you, Joel. This is a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing at this time to consider the item number 9, this ordinance regarding Atmos franchise fee. Is there anyone that wants to speak on either for or against this? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and entertain a motion to dispose. Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve ordinance number 2008-012-03, consideration of the 5% franchise free.
That's for first reading.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sutton.
That's for a second. It's the amendment to franchise agreement with Atmos Energy is the title.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 2008-012-03 on first reading. Any further discussion? Please register your vote. That is unanimous. Next on the agenda is item 10, the Belknap Corridor Overlay District. This is conduct a public hearing regarding the proposed Belknap Corridor Zoning Overlay District standards. We'll start out with a little presentation from Chuck Barnett, our Assistant City Manager. Chuck?
Thank you, Mayor, Council, ladies and gentlemen. Before you tonight, we're going to present to you, which is a culmination of a study that has been going on for 2 years. In May of 2006, we held interviews to select a consultant to move us through the study of the Belknap corridor to make a determination of what we would need or be required to set the tone for city standards for development in that corridor. We selected Kimley Horn to provide the expertise for us to move through that study. And after the ending of that study, which was approved in March of 2007, we then contracted with another consultant, Townscapes, to also help us decide those standards for that development along the corridor. Tonight, I'm going to have 2 people that will do presentations. I'll first present Garrett Burchett with Kimley Horn. And the second presenter will be Dennis Wilson, who's with Townscape. I'm not quite ready, but come on, Garrett. That's all right. I've been answering quite a few questions, and I'm sure you have too. Some of the discussions that are going out in with the citizens as it relates to the Belknap corridor. Last week, I had received a call from several residents that were representing about 50 residents that were asking specific questions. And let me try to answer those up front. The city is not condemning property. The city is not taking homes. The city is not doing development along Belknap so we can raise property taxes. None of those things are factual. They were far away from the truth. What you have is a study that has been performed by the 2 consultants to help set standards for developers and development if they choose to come in and redevelop along Belknap. The current standards are in place that have been approved by your Planning and Zoning Committee, and those standards will remain in place, and the current businesses remain in place, and they will be untouched until someone chooses to either sell their property for another type of development, or someone goes in and they want to demolish that property for future development. Again, the existing properties that are along that corridor are not affected unless they choose to sell that property. Okay, now we have developed along the corridor 3 districts. We held numerous workshops, and we contacted and sent out invitations to the people who live along the corridor, the business owners, and also adjacent residents, to invite them to a series of stakeholders meetings to which Kimley Horn held, and we had a culmination of 300 people who attended that corridor. And you'll see that on the slides tonight. The second thing we did is we held 10 workshops with the P&Z to get input back from the public and the citizens and the businesses about the development they'd like to see along the Belknap study as part of the corridor. Again, we've gone through this for 2 years. We started in May of 2006, and what you're going to hear tonight is the culmination of 2 years of involvement of the citizens and your planning and zoning and the business owners along that corridor to what they'd like to see as part of the development in the future. We produced Envision Belknap, and the Envision Belknap was a culmination of that study done by Kimley Horn. And on the back of it, it talks about the standards that are going to be needed to set the tone for development along that corridor in the future. We also outlined the number of years it's going to take. It could take as much as 30 years. This is not going to happen overnight. And what you're doing and looking at tonight is the presentations that are going to be a culmination of all of these citizens that were involved to help set the tone for the standards for the future. Again, this is not going to happen overnight, but does give us an opportunity for future development. So with that, let me start off with Garrett Burchett with Kimley Horn, and he'll walk you through the process as it relates to when we did complete this study.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak tonight. Sorry. Right. Where is it? Sorry, I'm a walker. This
is complicated.
Bob Barker, kind of. Yeah. Price is right? Well, again, thank you. And what I'm going to do is kind of go over what we did from Kimley Horn and Townscape's standpoint with the Envision Belknap study. And really, this was something that came up from citizens. It was when we first took on the project, it was a number of citizens that came out and said, this is an area that we want to see improved, and this is a focus that we have. And my overview is we're going to discuss how we came to the vision that we set for Envision Belknap, and then how we drilled down to the International District, the Arts District, and then the overall vision that you'll see in Dennis's presentation, and then finishing up with the implementation strategy that we set forth as Chuck discussed. To forge the vision, we had a number of public meetings, and it started off with a kickoff and stakeholder meetings and a town hall workshop, and kind of how all this came about was really the passion of the public, and that it was your plan, and that it was something that you guys had to develop. We as consultants weren't going to come in and have all the answers for Haltom City. You know the most about your corridor, and you know the most about what's going on. And what we heard was that Belknap was the core of the city, and you wanted to create a sense of place. You wanted, as you were driving from Fort Worth or from Richland Hills, you wanted to know that you were in Haltom City, and you wanted to, kind of have that in your mind. And the other thing that we heard was that this wasn't a plan for the bookshelf. You wanted action. You wanted something that would move forward. And like I said, we had a number of stakeholder meetings where we called in a number of landowners along the corridor. The invitation actually went out to everyone, but we asked them, what's your vision? What do you see happening? Where do you own properties? What are your interests? And that continued and allowed us to develop kind of these these hotspot areas where there was an added focus and where people had interest on their properties. I took that to the town hall workshop where we asked citizens to come on in and give us their input. We played a little game. We had some visual preference surveys that looked at different building types, different things, and gave you the opportunity to build up your new Belknap. And one of the things that was talked about in that meeting was, we have some things in place and we need to build on those, and we have some special things in Haltom City. And we allowed everybody to kind of put their chips on a map, put it all together, and come back and tell us what their vision was. And what we did with all those maps is we built consensus from them. And I apologize for the darkness of these photos, but we built a consensus of what people thought should happen on Belknap from your input. And what happened was that we were able to drill down into these districts. We were able to come out with the International District and the Arts District that were really focal points for the people at that public meeting. And we took those back after creating, some, I guess, initial plans. And we took that back to our, took that back to our stakeholder group. And actually, at the Arts Night, I think a number of you would remember at the Haltom Theater, we had a number of folks come out and ask us questions and see, what do we need to refine? What still needs some help in creating this vision? And that was the initial thing where we heard, this is a great plan, but how do we get it done? And that's what everybody wanted, an implementation plan. They didn't want this to sit on the shelf. They wanted to move forward. They wanted to identify funding sources and set benchmarks. What do we do next year? What do we do the following year after that? And how do we move into the future? And that brings me kind of to the first thing of that implementation plan, which was the overlay district, which created that sense of place that I discussed earlier. When you come to Haltom City, what's your thought along Belknap? And it's implementing that vision is really the overlay code that I'll have Dennis discuss.
Thank you, Garrett. As Garrett indicated, that when we were looking along the corridor of the Belknap, you know how long the corridor is as it goes from 377 down to Beach Street, and we were looking for some areas that we consider to be hot spots, are specific areas that could be success stories. And that's when we came up with the idea of an international district. And then on the other end, you had the arts district surrounded by the Haltom Theater. I've been meeting with who is now the city manager for Fort Worth, Dale Fessler. I met with him. We were talking about the corridor. If you look at what's happening in Fort Worth as it relates to 6 Points, with the redevelopment along there, they're wanting to see their portion of Belknap corridor continue to grow and to improve, coming and overflowing into Haltom City. The same thing we're trying to do, but we're trying to do it at two separate ends. And Dennis will go through the design and the criteria by which we've established for those. Haltom City is not unique. Now, unfortunately, Haltom City had its day. Haltom City was very vibrant. There was a lot of activity on there, and then we built something called 121, which bypassed Belknap, which allowed that continued excitement and development along that corridor to cease. It's not that what we have down there is not good. It is good, but I think we have an opportunity to set the tone of what's going to be happening in the future, the next 15 to 30 years, as far as development along the Belknap corridor. With that, Dennis, would you like to move us through the corridor?
That's great. Thanks, Chuck. What I want to do is provide a little bit of background, because just going in and talking about a zoning ordinance, it doesn't give it fair review, because there's a lot that goes into that, and it is a product of something to try and actually bring a vision to life. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a supportive market and the sort of phenomenal changes which are coming along in the development industry that you can see happening around us, happening in downtown and Fort Worth and in the suburbs of Fort Worth and in the region, in fact, across the country. Talk a bit about value creation and how do we create value in the developments that we do. It's not just spending money on the developments, it's how we think about and how we actually build them. And then take a look at the form-based code and what that is versus the regular zoning ordinance, and then finally go through some of the Belknap corridor code recommendations or standards. First of all, this is really a fascinating diagram because this is the population, this is 80, in 1970, 85 and older is that amount of the population. 5 years and younger is there. In 2020, that triangle is going to turn into almost a cylinder. And that says a lot of things. And one of the big things it says is that this sliver is where families with children reside. Above that, and then a sliver down here of singles before they get married and have kids, are a population which look for a different type of housing type. That is a huge market, and we've been seeing that happening in all of our communities across the country, where we see the market for townhouses and lofts and a variety of housing types as opposed to the traditional single-family houses that we've been building for the last 60 years. In fact, the U.S. Census Bureau says we have far more single-family lots and homes now than we will need in the year 2040 in terms of the population composition at that time, to just give you an idea of it. So we really need to be looking for...
Can you back up that thing? I've got to ask this. It's
Sure.
bugging me. How can you have more 85 and older females than you have 85 and younger females? See that next?
Well,
how can you jump up like that?
Life is harder for us males.
No, I'm talking about the females. Look, I mean, how do you... intuitively, that doesn't make sense, that there would be more 85 and older females than there are 85 and younger. I don't know what... Is it because they're 85 and up includes like everybody that's... Is that a
I see. Well, that's sticking out further than the one below. Well, it does that down there, and the demographers. I'm not sure how that works.
Okay, well, I thought.
I mean, that's a good question,
go ahead, carry on.
This was prepared by.
Oh, okay, I see. So 85 and up is like maybe 15 or 20 years. Okay, I got it.
Yeah. That. Good point.
Makes sense.
Thank you, Tom. Translated, traditional families in the year 2000, this is countrywide, comprised 27% of the households. In 2010, it's expected to be down to only 20%. And that traditional families are mom and pop and kids. People living alone comprise 27%, and it'll be a third of all households by 2010. DFW specifically, in 2005, 26% of all households were single persons, but 47% of all mortgages were to single households, which is a huge, huge change. Now, couple that with the fact that 4 million people are going to be moving to the Metroplex over the next 25 years. Over the last 2 years, 500 people a day has been moving to the Metroplex. That's a lot of people. So that is a big demand for housing and for jobs. And about 250 jobs a day has been created during that same this is the Council of Governments map that shows the entire region. Here's Fort Worth and Dallas. This area, this broader area, is moderate traffic congestion. The dark red is severe traffic congestion. And Haltom City is right in there. I've got a wiggly pointer, but it's right in there. Now, if we spend $45 billion on transportation and tollways and all this sort of thing, by the year 2025, we will have severe congestion limited to just this area. And there's Haltom City, smack in the middle of that severe congestion. Now, what this is saying is that no longer, we've been moving further and further out. You can see how congestion keeps moving out. We just keep moving out to the suburbs and building more neighborhoods and developments and that sort of thing. We've gotten so far out that people are now wanting to say, enough of this, I want to move closer in. And that puts Haltom City and other similar cities close in into an unusual and special market, because you're actually, what they say is halfway to everywhere, because you are near the jobs and employment and activity and hopefully transit shortly through here. That is a big change in what Haltom City is role that they're going to play over the next several years. Some of you may have been involved in an exercise that's been done, was done by Vision North Texas group, which included the Council of Governments and the Urban Land Institute and a number of other nonprofits, and where leaders from the 9-county region came together and took the 4 million people and 2.5 million jobs and had Lego blocks representing people and jobs, and said, okay, here are the maps. You need to put these people and jobs somewhere in the Metroplex. And a lot of people said, well, I don't want to do that. I want to keep some of these blocks away. Well, no, you can't do that, because the people are coming, that there's going to be the kind of growth. So what we found to a table, and there were 20 tables that were doing this, that were focusing on existing communities primarily, on transit corridors, and on freeway corridors, to put this new growth, to focus it, to be able to preserve some open space and that type of development. Okay, value creation. We've learned a lot about how to create value in development over the last number of years. And a lot of that is sort of soft issues, and we'll go through those. One of the things is giving a community the ability to have a hometown feel. You know, a place that you identify as your community, someplace you can be proud of, someplace you can meet your neighbors and share experiences with, where you feel safe. You have an identifiable sort of civic infrastructure. That's key to that small town feel. Another is the feeling of safety, and that is created with creating the high levels of activity in terms of mixed-use developments, opportunities to socialize, the site design, which ensures eyes on the streets and parks, so that people have an ownership and a sense of ownership of those public areas. These are basic things which work. And these are the kinds of things which have been put into this form-based code. Infrastructure, civic buildings, and and the roadways. Roadways and civic buildings and drainage and open space are the city's most important infrastructure elements, because the way they are developed and built creates a sense of the city and the quality of the community, and can evoke pride and identity in the community. Some examples here. Here are two subdivisions, one well-treed, another one not so well-treed. This is obviously a place people would rather live than here. It doesn't cost much more to do this, actually less. This is a narrower street, less concrete, just plant some young trees along there versus that. Here, drainage was treated as an awful thing, so it was just concreted and runoff, and so houses backed onto it. The other side created an amenity and value for properties in the entire area. And a study was done in the Metroplex of 3,400 home sales near 15 neighborhood parks. And what they found was that homes which were immediately adjacent to publicly accessible open space had a 23% premium in value over homes that were further than a quarter of a mile away. And that value, there was a demonstrated value from all the way to a quarter of a mile away. Okay, overview of form-based codes. Form-based codes are different than regular zoning ordinances, because regular zoning ordinances have been put together to sort of separate land uses, put in sort of some minimum standards, just to make sure that the worst things don't happen. Form-based codes actually try to make great things happen and create great places. So it focuses more on the public realm and less on the land uses. So the greater flexibility in land uses that can occur in these districts. Truly great places, we find, have certain aspects of building heights and setbacks and continuity of facades and streetscaping and that sort of thing, and that they're very often very flexible in terms of uses. So they're sustainable. The real overall goal is to create developments or to create an infrastructure of buildings which is sustainable over time. So we are not looking at buildings which we build today and we tear down in 15 years and then have to build something else. We build an infrastructure of buildings that we just sort of reinvest in over time, continue to improve and enhance, a lot like we've done in our old Texas towns forever. This is a picture of Waxahachie. These buildings were built 100 years ago, and people are still reinvesting in them. They're still high value. It's something that's not a throwaway. The key to attracting quality developers. If we're interested in having someone come and build some good developments here, what we find is they're looking for a straightforward ordinance. They're looking for standards that are put in place. What they are looking for is a benefit of not having to go through a bunch of public hearings for approvals. Developers hate that. So good developers will not put up with that. They'll go to a community that'll allow them to build their quality development. So we set the standards high, but we provide quick approvals for developments because time is money. and there's consistent quality requirements for the properties all around, so people are willing to put in an extra level of investment because they know the development next door and across the street are going to have to do the same quality of development. Now, the overlay district that's before council right now has some clear statements in terms of purpose in order to provide guidance for interpretation of the standards, and includes adopting a framework plan as part of the comprehensive plan, which provides a sort of structure and organization for the districts, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the one thing I really want to point out and reinforce what Chuck was saying is that the passage of this ordinance and the application of it to the land along the corridor does not affect any existing business or building. So that if you have, for example, a car lot, you can continue to use that property as a car lot forever. You can sell that car lot to somebody else and they can continue to use it forever. There's two things that trigger conformity. One is building conformity and the other is use conformity. The use conformity is that if a use is discontinued for a certain period of time, and James, I'm not sure what that period of time is, if you discontinue use, that it triggers conformity? 6 months. 6 months. So if the use is continuous with less than 6 months gap, it can go on forever. Building conformity, any new additions would need to comply with standards, but the existing buildings can go on as they are. If they are torn down and are rebuilt, then they need to meet the new standards, just like current ordinances, because you now have building code, new building codes, and that sort of thing, which triggers the same sort of conformity standards.
Can I interject something real quick, Dennis?
Sure.
One of the things we talked about in pre-council, if that were to happen, God forbid, that a business were to be torn down right now, even without this overlay district, there are new codes in place from the ISO standards that would kick in, and there would have to be a development to a higher quality than they are right now, even if this overlay district were not in place. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
This is the framework plan, and I'm going to keep referring to this. The International District is down at the sort of southwest end at Beach Street. This is the Arts District there at 377 in Belknap. The sort of gray area here is the Corridor District. And then the area outside of these three districts to the heavy line is called the Transition District. And that's a transition to the existing single-family neighborhoods which lie beyond. So we'll talk a little bit about each of those districts. But basically, the International District and the Arts District have almost identical standards in how they're developed. Land use. The International District and Arts District all allow, at the property owner's choice, retail, personal service, office, urban residential lofts, townhouse uses. So that can all be determined by the property owner or developer and is allowed. Now in the Corridor District, that's this area in the tan, retail, personal service, and office Residential, because that area is facing on to Belknap, residential is allowed only if it's above another use when it's facing directly onto Belknap, or if it's located behind the building that's facing Belknap. So it's basically buffered a bit from the Belknap corridor. And I'll show you a section, too, that will talk about some of that buffering. So that is also a mixed-use district. Not quite as free and open as the Arts District and International District. And then the Transition District, which is, again, this area outside leading up to the existing single-family areas, a range of residential uses would be allowed. Townhouse, single-family, zero-lot line type house, and mother-in-law suites on those properties would be allowed. Basically a second unit, which would be a minor, less size than the primary unit. But no primary retail or commercial would be allowed in that area. So that is limited primarily to residential uses only in that area. Some of the sub-district standards in the Arts District and International Districts, because those are intended to be the focal points of the entire corridor, it's intended that those will be the highest density, and they would be a minimum of 2 stories, maximum of 4 stories of development. And in the corridor and the transition district, it's a minimum of 1 story with a maximum of 3 stories. And then different setbacks. Buildings facing on Belknap would have a 100-foot setback, and I'll show you that diagram in a moment. And buildings facing on Denton Highway will have that same setback because they're large, highly traveled roadways. Block faces, encouraging building frontage, continuous building frontage to the Bill 2 lines. Where there's not that larger setback, there's an 18 to 20 foot or so setback to bring buildings out to the street, encourage on-street parking. This is the Belknap and Denton Highway corridor section. This is the major roadway, the highways out here, the 6-lane Belknap. 4-lane, okay, 5 lane with turn lanes. 4 lanes with turn lanes, sorry. High traffic highway corridor. Then there would be a landscape area, hike bike trail, landscape area, then full bay of parking with what we call a browsing lane for slow traffic, and then the sidewalk would move back to in front of the building, and the Bill 2 line would be back here at about 100 feet. Now that provides a bit of separation and buffer. It also provides for slow-moving traffic for shopping and browsing along that drive. Another key standard is that for large sites, there may be some, probably not many, but on large sites where big boxes might be developed, it's important to make sure that the sites are planned in a way that they can be broken down and reused rather than having large big box sites that we see all over the Metroplex which go dark. They're deed restricted against any competitors, and they're real blights in communities. So they need to be designed to allow additional development or up to the street so they can be subdivided and be actually quickly reused. Buildings, very simple things, not trying to establish design of buildings, except just some basic timeless principles of having a top, middle, and a base of the buildings. And some example, this is Asian, but again, there's sort of a base, middle, and top to those buildings, so it can happen in any kind of style of architecture. Buildings greater than 3 stories should be set back at the 3rd story, after the 3rd story. Retail at grade, again, just good principles of retailing. Successful retailing is insetting the entries into the retail, providing canopies for weather protection, clear glass at grade for interest for pedestrians, and residential at grade, elevating the ground floor of the residential to separate it from the public area so that it separates the public realm from the private realm, so which is an important distinction to make. It can include a patio up there as well as the entry to the residential unit. And then a range of building types. Again, not defining styles, but large residential homes, smaller homes that may be in the 850 to 1,200 square foot category, which could face directly onto common greens, townhouses, multi-unit homes, which may be 4 to 6 units, urban housing, and loft-type units, mixed use with retail at grade, any kind of configuration, and single-story shop fronts. Parking, again, maximize on-street parking wherever we can. We're not able to do it on the highway corridors, but we can do it on all the other streets. Encourage parking to be behind the buildings and shared parking, and encourage bicycle parking. Requiring open space, 15% in the Arts District and International District, 20% in the Transition District, but homes must face onto the open space. And there's a wide variety of ways to can create open space without doing parks necessarily, but there's a lot of ways to do that, and lots should be within a close proximity of open space, 800 feet. And streetscaping includes street trees and street furniture, residential frontage, and then finally administration, and this is which is a major benefit for the development community, is the system of waivers. If it's a minor waiver means that we can modify the standard as long as it's consistent with the intent of the ordinance, and have staff approval, administrative approval, so that a development plan can be approved and you go on to building permit. Major waiver is where it's considered not consistent with the intent of the ordinance, and it has to go through Plan Commission and Council, which means public hearings. So that is a major incentive to the development community over what currently happens with planned development districts and other types of developments. And then finally, this is the development, the framework plan. Again, the red area is where retail at grade is required construction. Now, you can put in residential or office or any use in there, but if your property is facing any of these street frontages, you have to build a minimum 12-foot clear height on the ground floor so that when the market develops, it can go to retail uses. The green is the hike-bike trails, which connects into what may be hopefully future regional trails. And the dotted circles are a 5-minute radius walk. So they fit very nicely with the creation of those, the International and Arts District creations. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. Now we'll
Mayor, if I could just make
oh,
some...
you got some more stuff?
Just for a closing
Okay.
comment,
All right.
the creation of the overlay district will allow the city to set standards for development, and I just want to recap. We began this process in 2006, and as part of that plan that we got involved as far as the citizens and et cetera, we were using their input. This wasn't something that we went out and just created on our own. We were getting what we termed to be the stakeholders for their involvement to help us establish these standards. As the development standards are set, which again sets the tone to how development is going to happen in the future, those individuals that choose to come in and see the worth of investing in Haltom City for the future are the ones that will be providing the incentives and also providing the monetary consideration for them to carry on with this development. I think the question of that we're bringing this to you now, again, it's a culmination of 2 years of investing staff time and citizen involvement to try to bring you a document for you to look at and to consider for implementation. I think Dennis did a good job in explaining what's happening. You got two things which are happening within the Metroplex. One is the demographics is changing, and the other thing is the transportation issue is coming to a forefront immediately. And you look at all the developments happening as far as mixed use that's happening in some of the corridors along Fort Worth. You look at Belknap, and you can relate to that as it relates to Magnolia, Hemp Hill Street, Rosedale, Lancaster, and some of those areas. I was born and raised on Hemp Hill, and I've seen what has happened as far as development declining and the lack of, and then what is happening right now with some vision as far as putting some standards in place for future development. With that, Mayor and Council, I'll turn it over to you to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Chuck. We have any comments or questions from the dais here before we open up the public hearing? All righty. If not, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. And we've had several people that signed up to speak here, and we'll just get there and ask you to try to keep it as brief as you can, because there's so many of us. But just certainly want to address all the issues that you feel are appropriate. First speaker is Mary Haltom. Mary, you want to come up?
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it?
Got it.
Okey-doke. All right. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of things, and he's reiterated it real well, so I'm not going to go too deep. The purpose centers around partly being a pedestrian-friendly environment, as I understand from the website, with public sidewalks, parks, and plazas, with streets and buildings which will contribute to a safe and pedestrian-friendly environment. The paved section with dimensions are set, with curb to curb faces and the parkways, and it talks a lot about the streets and the view and the sidewalks. And that curbless streets would be allowed adjacent to greenways, public space, and trails for stormwater management purposes. That kind of worried me. It describes street furniture with street light standards, pedestrian light standards, traffic signals with lights, street signs, and some improvements, I would say. And I just, any successful implementation of this Belknap corridor plan, I think, must be a partnership between the city and the affected property owners. And I'm still not convinced that the city is ready to step up to the plate and provide the resources now for the infrastructure and the improvements that are needed to achieve the intended development look. I haven't been involved in all the discussions, but I have been at least one, and I don't see how the appearance could be achieved without curbs, gutters, drainage, etc., especially on Belknap. At previous meetings, it seemed to me that the city was a little reluctant to say that they had the funding, that they had the money to do all these improvements, and that they were not available, that there were some other needs that maybe needed to be met first, and that's understandable. If this is the case, this overlay will in effect put the property owners in a holding pattern on development pending an unknown future date. And I understand it's not an overnight project, but when you pass this, it is overnight requirements for the property owners. It may not be overnight requirements for the developers, but it is for the property owners. And so we'll be in a holding pattern until the city is able to do their part, and we don't know when that's going to be. This is an unfair burden on the property owners, and it will cause uncertainty and discourage improvements or developments. I was just sitting here listening about, in the Arts District, for example, 50% of the allowed uses are residential. 15% of the space is supposed to be open space. So that rather than tear down some of the lower quality buildings in that district and being required to build new two-story buildings, I would anticipate that likely those smaller, crappy little buildings will remain there for a few more years, because unless you've got tenants and developers willing to build those two-story buildings, it's not going to happen. The partnership is a key to developing and attracting the quality new developers. And if we don't have the resources and the city can't be a partner, they're not going to come. And again, I wanted to ask, where are the customers for the vision? As much as we all, and I would love to see this vision. I believe that Belknap, with a straight shot to downtown Fort Worth, there's a future there. There really is. I don't doubt that one bit. But the rule is retail follows rooftops, and not the other way around. And I have owned a store in Camp Bowie for 25 years. It's gone now. Big weight off my shoulders. But when they tore down public housing, when they started building new houses in the Como area, then we saw the Dallas developer come over and fix up 6333, not before. Camp Bowie, believe it or not, was on a downhill slide until we started seeing improvement in the residential area. And that is the way you need to achieve this vision. If you can improve your customer base, then businesses will want to come and they'll want to put up centers to meet your vision. Don't get the cart before the horse, because it will not work. You was talking about Hemphill and Magnolia, and if you've been over in the Hemphill and Magnolia area, and I have had lots of friends with businesses on Magnolia that didn't make it. And now there's new housing. Now people are really building great housing developments, and just the kind of developments he's talking about with the lofts and the smaller square footage, and it's wonderful. And I think now the retail and the business area will be able to develop because they're going to have the customers. But if it's the belief that fixing Belknap will fix the problems of the surrounding neighborhoods, that is an erroneous belief. If you will fix the code issues, the crime issues, the streets, the drainage issues, and make Haltom City a place where people want to live, then Belknap will follow.
Thank you, Mary. Do you mind engaging in dialogue? I heard you say retail follows residential rooftops. Okay. Well, I think a lot of the objection I've heard from some of the folks here is to the residential being on top of the retail. Well, it seems to me, and I don't know this, I'm just asking, if you built a two-story building down on Belknap and you opened it up and put lofts in there and invited people to come live there, would that not be a reasonably decent investment to attract retail to come in up under them then?
I think that would be good if you have people wanting to buy the lofts or rent the lofts. Right now, Montgomery Plaza, they're not even moving forward fast because they don't have people to buy those lofts. You talk to any realtor, we're already over lofted.
Okay. Well, that's why I'm asking. I mean, that's the purpose of this is for some dialogue. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. I appreciate it. All right. Next is Roger Dissiker. Okay, Roger.
Thank you, Council. Again, my name is Roger Dissiker. I'm an attorney from Fort Worth. I've been hired by the G.W. Haltom Family Trust, which owns approximately 31 acres of real estate in these affected areas, to present their views to the Council about what this overlay means to them. I think that buzzing was my cell phone, even though I thought it was turned off. My apologies. And I want to talk for a minute about the law of unintended consequences, because your goals here are laudable. I mean, they're what every city council should be doing. You're trying to improve your quality of life here in Haltom City. You want to improve your tax base. You want to improve the city. How do you go about doing that? I think everyone's hit upon it. You have to attract new business or grow what you already have. So how does the city council go about doing that? How do you bring in the retail that's following the rooftops? Well, your design consultant talked briefly about some place like South Lake. Well, what does South Lake have to offer the Crate and Barrel that's in their packet in one of the pictures showing what a feature building should look like? South Lake has big rooftops with very high, above national average median incomes. And let's talk about Fort Worth and the 6 Points area. What are they providing? Well, Fort Worth is throwing in a ton of money in the areas that it's redeveloping in the form of incentives and infrastructure development and tax incremental funding districts that pay for things like drainage and street curbs and the things that you have to have in place before you can ask a business to throw up a 2 or 3 story building. Montgomery Street was another area we talked about. Paris Coffee Shop, I'm sure many of you folks have been to eat. It's one of my favorite places. But you notice in the last couple of years, it's hard to get there. Why? Because the city of Fort Worth has been tearing up and rebuilding all the infrastructure around that to make the Montgomery area take off, the Montgomery Street redevelopment go. The city is plowing money into that. 7th Street corridor you're just talking about, the Montgomery Awards building is kind of stuck in neutral right now because the area is overlofted. When you look at what's going on back there where Acme used to be, City of Fort Worth is putting in $2 million into drainage, water, and sewage improvements. That's back off behind off 7th Street, and you don't see it from 7th Street, but when you wander back through there to get to Dos Gringos, another place I go to eat a lot, that's been there forever, you have to wander through the city's construction sites, and you see their big signs about their capital improvements. Now, my point with all that is you have to offer something to the retailers you're trying to attract. And there's not a lot of space there as things are lined up now for big box development, but there's plenty of space for your Crate and Barrels or your Starbucks coffee or those sorts of places. But real estate builders or real estate developers are not, if you build it, they will come sort of people. I mean, we all know that. You got to offer them a little something. There has to be a little sugar involved to bring them to the table. And I asked, in all frankness, is Haltom City offering the per capita income that a place like South Lake throws up, and the retailers are killing themselves to get up there and will pay whatever is necessary to get into their retail space? Crate and Barrel will pay the rents or the development requirements at South Lake Town Center because they got all those soccer moms driving their big SUVs right down the street with all that disposable income.
Roger, I'm going to interrupt you if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Let's not talk about South Lake. I know our guy brought it up. I don't like to talk about South Lake. Let's talk about the Magnolia, you know. Let's talk about Hemphill. Let's talk about down there at 6 Points. Places that we understand are more like the Belknap we have. I mean, I got your point. I think it's well made, but I don't think we need to, compare ourselves to South Lake. We know we don't have the income here of South Lake.
Well, then all the things you see going on in Fort Worth, and I work with the Fort Worth economic redevelopment folks some, and I had the good fortune to be in the leadership Fort Worth class a couple of years ago where we studied all these things. Fort Worth is pouring in its own resources to make those areas go. Well, we all know the seed money that started the rebirth of Fort Worth was from one family that rebuilt downtown. But what people don't remember is that wasn't all Bass money. The city of Fort Worth stepped up hand in hand with them and created that first TIF in downtown Fort Worth to provide security that encouraged people to bring their families down into Sundance Square. Because until they created that TIF and put in all those extra security measures, you weren't going to take your wife and children or your little kids down into Sundance Square in an evening to go see a movie, no matter how nice the movie theater was that code required them to build. There was another piece to the puzzle, and there was the partnership like Mary was talking about. The city has to get involved with that. Now, back to the unintended consequences I was talking about. If you just make requirements, if you just force developers or landowners to put up a 2-story building with or without the curb requirements out there that the city may not be able to build right now, what are you doing to that land? Without the incentives to make it go, you're trapping those car lots like they are now. That I understand from a city planning position, you want rid of the car lots. You want to develop a more dense use that will generate more tax income for the city. But if you require the people who own those lots to build at such a high level that then the rents they have to charge, that's not my phone. The rents they have to charge to make up that money, they can never sell it and they can never redevelop it. You then ensure unintentionally that you always have a car lot there or an auto repair place there. It will always be a small mom and pop operation. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not in keeping with what you want to do.
Well, Roger, I want to interrupt you again.
Sure.
I don't know of anybody up here that said we want to get rid of car lots. I think what we have said is we want to improve the property values up along Belknap and beyond. I mean,
okay, let's talk. Yes, sir, Mayor.
There's no hurry to do that. I mean, I just want to tell you there was a car lot up here on 28th and Beach not long ago that they were in business for a long, long time, and a gas company, a gasoline station came up there and bought them out, and they were just happy as larks. They took their money. I don't know what the folks are doing now, but they were just happy as larks. Not to be in that business there because they got paid good money to go do something else. And that's all. We're just trying to help make that happen. And I wanted to follow up on your TIF too. Do you know what the timing was on the TIF and the overlay districts or the changes that took place down in Fort Worth? Were they hand in hand?
Yes.
Was the TIF in advance or how did
that downtown security TIF was one of the first, to my recollection, that the state had authorized, and that was done late 70s, early 80s, as the rest of the Sundance Square development was begun.
Because I personally, I'm on board. I agree with you. I think we have to have something to give back to the property owners and people that we're asking to invest and take a risk here. We need to share that and share that risk and certainly make it worth their while to do that. And
on an item of risk, the plan as presented has a 50% building requirement. That is, we seem to have been really unlucky around here the last several years with Mother Nature sending us tornadoes in the spring. And under these plans, if you're damaged to the point where city planning and zoning or building permit folks think you're at 50% rebuild, then you have to comply with the code. Well, I know that in 6 Points on Belknap, same street, there was a lot of protest about the 50% problem, and the city has negotiated and partnered with the business owners down there to move that up to 70%. I don't know if that's been put in writing yet, but I was talking to someone with economic development from the city over the weekend about this very issue before coming here, and they're moving that to 70% for rebuilds. In case something does happen, in case there's a fire or a flood at your business, you're not then required to do something entirely new, to then price yourself out of your retailers.
Well, and Dennis did point out that this does provide for that. This does provide for that, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, you could appeal to the council to get a major waiver, but I understand what you're saying. Certainly, having that built in up front is a lot more comforting than taking the risk that you might not get the approval, if something did happen. But I like your suggestion, and I appreciate your throwing some ideas out here, because this is exactly what we were looking for, was ideas to come forth and have a good dialogue.
Now, just as a final example, the Haltom, G.W. Haltom Trust owns vacant land that's in your arts district. I think we'd all agree that a Starbucks would be a good use in that arts district. He couldn't sell, or the trust couldn't sell to a Starbucks, because you require a 2-story building. And Starbucks' national footprint, their national prototype building, is a 1-story standalone with a drive-through, because that's what you'd want. If I was Starbucks, that's what I want on Belknap, a high-traffic road. I want consumers to be able to pull in and drive through. But if I'm Starbucks, I'm never going in there, because I'm not putting up a 2-story building if I buy land from the Haltom Trust. I just never do it. Starbucks doesn't build a 2-story building, and what are they going to do at the 2nd story? Then they have to come to you to get a major waiver, and that is cost and burden that a national retailer like Starbucks, who would be a perfect fit for what you want to do.
You ever been to a Starbucks in downtown Seattle?
I have never been to Seattle, sir.
Oh man,
or San Antonio.
You're missing it. They do have multiple.
Okay,
stories.
but Seattle, I think I know what you're talking about in San Antonio, and that's on the Riverwalk. Yeah. Well, there's a ton of pedestrian traffic.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, that's not on State Highway 26 Belknap, where you have cars flying by at 50 miles an hour, even though the posted speed limit might be a little lower. That's your problem. Is that the design requirements are great, but they're going to create the unintended consequence of locking in the uses you currently have, which will not increase your tax base, and you're actually going to depress your tax revenues long term instead of increasing them, as is your goal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Next up, Mr. Bob Hamilton of the Northeast Tarrant Chamber of Commerce. Bob?
Mayor, Council, thank you. Well, it's been an interesting evening. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to speak to each of you about something that really is heartbread and heartthrob of the Northeast Tarrant Chamber, and it's economic development. This chamber represents 1,200 businesses from throughout the Metroplex area, and we're proud to say that 152 of our businesses reside in Haltom City. Very proud of that fact. It does concern the board of directors of our Chamber of Commerce, though, when we see progress beginning to slow down in any of our 4 cities. What the city's planning to do, we think, with Envision Belknap area is challenging, to say the least. It's obvious from the discussion tonight. I have been to a few of these meetings that were shown on the slides up here. And the majority of them, the folks I talked to, are very excited about the changes and the opportunities and the future for the city. And I will tell you that in order for this city to move ahead, you have to stay ahead. You're going to get lost if you don't keep up and change with the way that your community responds to you and your business community rallies around the decisions made from this council. I would also tell you that whatever decision you make in regards to moving ahead, don't forget to continue to move. It may take a while. As Chuck brought to your attention, it may take years for these things to develop. I don't know that a 2-story Starbucks is going to stop me from going to a Starbucks. You have a Starbucks that's coming into the north side of your city right now. It's convenient. It's a little bit more discussing today. But what does excite the Chamber of Commerce is the quality of life issues and the and there's no lose here at all for your communities. Regardless if you build the homes first or help them, if you bring in TIFs to your city, if you stress the importance of attracting big boxes or small businesses, you're going to win. Because this is a great place to live for your citizens. We hear it all the time. We see businesses more and more coming to this area. This past year, our Chamber of Commerce added 365 businesses to our rolls. Why? This is the place to live. This is where business is coming because the rooftops will spend the money, and they're there for you. On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, we also want to let you know we support this effort, and we'll do whatever we can to enhance your plans and see them through, whatever plans they are. We're on board with you. We see great value in moving ahead. It's our 50th anniversary year this past year, and we mentioned the number of members that we added. It's a testimony to the businesses doing everything that they possibly can to stay open. They're not in business to close 6 months later. You have a good track record in your city of supporting your businesses over the past years. And this Envision Belknap plan is a progressive, it's an aggressive way to continue to enhance your city and your boundaries. And it's also important to the prosperity of your future that you always continue to plan ahead and be productive with your visionary goals for the city and its residents. If my father taught me one thing growing up, it was that if you keep doing things the way you always have, you should expect the same results. You folks have got an opportunity here to knock the door down with what you're planning here. You have one of the strongest Asian communities in your backyard. They're very proactive. They love Haltom City. They take great pride in their businesses and their schools. It's evident if you go to any of the schools in your neck of the woods, and you can see it. It's very, very evident. I want to thank you again for the partnership that this organization, this chamber organization, has had with your city over the years. We value what you value, and we commend you for your outstanding efforts in seeing and being visionaries. I hope that you're all alive when this does finally get complete. But if you're not, take great pride right now to know that you have the opportunity to do the right thing for your citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we'll hear from Walter Layton. Walter?
I had some questions.
Walter Layton. Walter?
I had some questions. I think they got answered, but I'll go over them anyway, just in case. I've lived here all my life. When I was a lad, Layton Avenue was a dirt trail. Belknap was a highway. There was no Haltom City. Tarrant County. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, all right.
There you go.
Sure. I own property down there. I grew up down there. I was grow, watch it decline. What Mary said really rung home to me with the rooftops. That's a poor neighborhood, not like it used to be. And that point makes a lot of sense to me as far as retail following rooftops. That one thing really meant a lot to me. And I grew up, I saw it happen. I saw all this decline. That's my home down there. I'm down there all the time now. I have property and I try to maintain it. Don't do a very good job, do I, Jim? But anyway, I try. I've read the zoning overlay. I don't fully understand it. I have some questions. I think you answered them. I will go over them anyway and then finish very quickly. It's my understanding that the city will not pay for islands with trees or park benches or sidewalks.
Well, let us
I can
try to
take that
answer
as a no, probably.
Well, let's try to answer that.
Okay.
You're talking about the trees and the strips there between the
exactly.
the front parking or the.
The point I'm trying to probably make is that Mary said that maybe the city could go with us in a joint venture and offer incentives or help property owners or developers who want to do something like this.
Well, I
This
think
is-
there's going to have to be some incentives laid out.
That's what I
and,
want to
and
hear. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, and there's going to be, and whether it's going to be in that form, whatever, okay, we'll put in
End of
trees.
question.
I'm not sure it'll be that.
You answered
but-
my question.
Okay.
Are you going to enforce overlay on existing renting buildings? I think you answered that. If one of my places goes vacant and I want to re-rent it, you're not going to come there and make me rebuild it, tear it down, whatever. That's what you said. That's what Mr.
Correct.
Barnett said, right?
Correct.
Okay. You answered that. And you said you wouldn't take property away from us. You wouldn't take a lien against our property if we didn't meet the requirements of this thing, whatever it may be.
The purpose of this is not for the city to buy it and flip it over to a developer. That's not the purpose of this thing. We're not going to be condemning land, eminent domain, to buy it for ourselves. No.
Okay.
It may be, the property may be condemned because the structure is, it's structurally unsound.
Right.
That's a part of condemnation. Now, that may very well happen.
Right.
But as far as for the city to exercise eminent domain, that will not happen. That is not the plan.
That was my question, and you answered it, and I appreciate that. In summary, I think that we need to move slowly on something like this, cautiously. I worked as a rookie policeman on Magnolia Street. I know what Magnolia Street is. I've been to Paris Coffee Shop a lot. Grew up 6 Points. Grew up here. Went to school here all my life. And I know this area like the back of my hand. Some change is taking place down there that probably we don't realize, some of us do. I wouldn't live down there now. I don't know if any of you would. Some of you probably do. And it could be refurbished, hopefully. Watching what happened on Samuels Avenue in Fort Worth, that's a great thing. That guy that went in there and developed that, I don't even remember his name, but I've heard my son talk about it. And, he went in there to an area that was really, really bad. And they're doing a lot. They've redeveloped that area. I felt like that I was going to get up here and say things other than this, but after hearing the presentations made, they stole my thunder. Roger and Mary, I thank you. I agree with you, and that's the way I feel about it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, you bet. Thank you, Walter. Next up, Mr. Coy Quine.
Mayor, Councilman, my name is Coy Quine. I'm with Quine and Associates. We lease out or manage virtually every shopping center up and down Belknap and Denton Highway in the last 20 years. I first started being involved in Haltom City in 1985 when I took over Haltom Plaza, which at that time showed signs of being a 1958 shopping center. I have remodeled, expanded, redone. Matter of fact, if you've driven by Haltom Plaza in the last 2 weeks, I think you've seen a new glimmer to it. We are constantly in our retail centers trying to do things that improve the curb appeal of our shopping centers. And the purpose of that is to attract retailers. I'm involved in 130 shopping centers in Texas, Oklahoma, most of which are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Tom, I understand you're from Killeen. I have an office in Coppers Cove. We've had some interaction down there. I have shopping centers in Killeen. We are well in tune. We have over 1,200 retail tenants with over 6 million square feet of retail. Folks, we develop for many of our owners. If any of you have been up 377, the first thing you get into in Keller is Bear Creek Plaza. That's a project that we put together working with the city staff at Keller. And I think it's a whale of a good-looking project. We didn't have to come up to the street. We put in a lot of landscaping. We put in a lot of architectural delineation designs in order to create something that is very attractive and very meaningful for the city of Keller. I don't go to a single meeting in the city of Keller that I'm not thanked for what we did as the embarking point for the city of Keller. They've got a town square. They've got a lot of entities up there. but we set the pattern for what's happening retail-wise in Keller. You know, most of us are Texans, and we have a tendency to want to have our car. I've been in the retail business, and I've tried to put parking lots behind shopping centers, and retailers don't like it. First of all, what that does is that means they have to have two focal points for security, the front door and the back door, which creates added expense for them. So they're not interested in that. They want to be able to control the traffic flow in and out of their shopping centers. When you start developing these type facilities that you're talking about mandating, then you're creating an atmosphere that is unfriendly to retailers. Now then, mom and pop retailers, where they're taking 45 or 50 feet, they really don't necessarily have the same thought process. They just want to know what their store's going to look like. Your presentation, Dennis, did a very nice job. It's a very lovely presentation. I haven't seen a recessed storefront in a retail strip center, town center, or anywhere in over 30 years. Every center that I've been involved in, we have gone in and eliminated these recessed storefronts. First of all, with rents at the prices they are today for retail. Most retail space, new space that's going up in the market is going to be in the $18 to $24 plus nets. Now then, that means that they're going to be paying anywhere from $22 to $28 a foot. So when you rent a space, you rent it from the front edge of the property, from the glass to the back of the building, outside wall. So most retailers are not willing to pay $28 or $22 for a 4-foot recessed area that they can't put sales merchandise into. It's a display. So that aspect of retailing has changed. I came from a retail background before I became a broker in the real estate commission, real estate. I represent developers, and I go before many, many, many city councils. And I'm not saying Haltom City is anti-developer, but the way you're structuring this deal, that if you come in for a variance, for instance, Haltom Plaza, heaven forbid if I had a tornado like the one that hit the Minyard store down on the beach, come through and take out 4 or 5 of the buildings there, then we would have to come to the city to say, we need a variance or on this new overlay district because we can't replace the buildings that we've got. We have to come up and meet the new codes. We have to come up and meet the new setback requirements. Well, that means we're going to have a very strange configuration of a property if we only lose the south half and we have the north half. We're not going to get a grocery store to reoccupy the premises. Grocery people, they want their lines, their parking lines running straight into their front doors. They don't even want them crosswise. They want them running straight into the front doors. As if you've read or looked in the market, the grocery store business is in a turmoil in this market right now. There is not a grocery store expanding other than Walmart or Target through their superstores. Minyard's is closing stores right and left. They closed the store down on Beach. Tom Thumb took over several Winn-Dixies and closed those, several of those already. I think they took 13 stores and they closed 6 of them after they took them. Kroger, on the other hand, has taken 18 of the stores, and I think they've only closed 3 of the Winn-Dixie stores. So the grocery store business is in a real turmoil right now. We're fortunate in the fact that there is an influx of new concept stores that are coming into the market as far as grocery is concerned, with your Sprouts, your Whole Foods, the Hispanic grocery stores that are coming into the market, El Rancho, the Jerry's, the Terry's, the Malone's, the Elrod's that are expanding. And they're taking niche markets and expanding upon that. The Asians have done a super job of taking some of the big boxes they talk about, Dennis talks about, that are sitting vacant, taking these and turning them into Oriental or Asian centers. The Sam's or Walmart store on 303, which is a very similar street to Belknap. Traffic a little faster, I think, on 303 than it is here, but it's a very similar street. It's a very good blue-collar business market. The Asian developer bought the Walmart store over there, and he put in a 60,000 square foot grocery store, 50,000 square foot store, and he has filled up that center by cutting off the back of it, putting 50-foot depth spaces in, and he's filled it up with Asian merchants who are catering to that element of the market. It's been done very well. I mean, I think we've done a reasonable job of doing that with our Belknap Shopping Center that Lou Pham represents now. Retail-wise, retail is having a tough time right now. You know, you talk about the Starbucks, and there's another new operation. One of the old Dallas-Fort Worth families, Zale people, are now the franchisees for Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts has announced that they're going to put 160 stores in the market. They've got 4 franchisees. But again, they want their cookie cutter. They don't want the second story. They want to be able to build their building.
Mr. Quinn, let me ask you something. You've waxed pretty eloquently here about all the things we're doing wrong in this overlay district. Is it your position that we shouldn't do anything, or have you got some things that we could actually do to help? I mean, you know, we've got some folks on both sides of us that are concentrating and trying to help the businesses in the Fort Worth Inn and in Richland Hills and North Richland Hills, and we're sitting in here in the middle, and we haven't done anything yet. Could you help us out? What can we do? I mean, I'm just nervous about just sitting here on my hands for the next 10 years.
No, I think you've got a great plan. I think you're taking it too far for a developer to come in. First of all, in order for a developer to come in and put together the type project that Dennis and them are talking about, they're going to have to be able to assemble some acreage. And there's not a we've got the largest parcel here. Mr. Haltom's probably got the next largest assemblage. And if you could assemble 30 to 40 acres, then you could put together one of these town center type concepts and utilize that. Montgomery Plaza, I believe, had over 60 acres is what the initial part that they were able to do there. I've got a map. I mean, your overlay district map, you'll look. I mean, you've got a lot of individual owners. You've got, I mean, every time we come in to redo something, we have to bring the buildings up to code. Your architectural requirements today are such, we can't rebuild the buildings that we built 20 years ago. They're a lot different. But we need to be able to build buildings that are functional, that we can rent and do what we need to do. I think it's great. I mean, again, I'll go back to Keller. Our fascia there is over 30 foot tall. It's a single retail building. But we went up 30 feet in order to create the massive look that we're trying to accomplish and the city of Keller was trying to accomplish. And we use a lot of different architectural delineation in that. Retail is in a real tough position right now. There was a survey done by the Weissman Company that comes out every year. I don't know whether, Tom, you get it or not, but you might want to get it. They do a super job of surveying all the retail shopping in the Metroplex. They do it for retail, they do it for industrial, they do it for office. They surveyed every shopping center in the Metroplex, the 21 counties or whatever it is, over 10,000 square feet. As of December 31st, 2007, retail was 88% occupied, which is really good, really good. We've never been able to accomplish that collectively in Haltom City. We'll get up to 92, and then we'll drop back down to 84. As I said, we've done a lot of things through the years to revitalize and to change the appearance of our shopping centers in trying to do that. Retail is having a tough time right now. My son just told me that our company, with our 6 million square feet, fell to 86% leased, which is the first time in over 15 years that we've been below 88. We've been able to maintain that 88, and in many instances, we've been able to maintain higher than that for several years. But retailing is real tough. When you build the type facility that you're mandating that with this overlay district, it becomes even more difficult.
Mr. Quine, you made a mention of the color that you had a 30-foot facade. Is that a recommendation? Is a nice 2-story facade? Is that
if that's
like
what,
a movie set? You know,
if that, I mean, no. Unfortunately, it's not. That's not what we did. If that's the element that you're trying to accomplish along Belknap, then there's other ways to do it besides forcing developers to go into combination retail residential. I know that Dennis and them have quoted several areas that are doing very well at this. I have an article that was written by Steve Brown from the Dallas Morning News, and I'm sorry that I only made 9 copies, but it talks about Ross Avenue, which is a heavy concentration of. Here's another one. Roger one. Sorry. Heavy concentration of rooftops, but yet the retail is not doing well. Matter of fact, I think they said in that article that they'd had several open, mom and pops open, and had closed in the 3 years it's been down there. This is again. He has other projects in there. It's a great. The mixed-use development is a great vehicle if you're able to assemble and put together the correct acreage so that you can do it in mass. But you need to control the retail aspect of it. Just because you have a lot of lofts, what you need to do, you need to look at being able to convert the downstairs retail. Let it stay as residential. Maybe just take the 3 end caps of a long 600-foot block or whatever it is, where you could actually take and convert it either way, making sure that it's on the same level. I don't know whether you all looked at that or not, Dennis, but
well, will you be available? Because I mean, we talked about this for a couple of years, you know, and people were all excited about doing mixed
Mayor,
use and you know.
Mayor,
these are and believe me, I mean this is kind of what we was looking for. Obviously, was some public input, but I've got some more speakers here, and I was going to ask you to wrap it up there pretty quick.
I'm over here in Fort Worth every week. I mean, the first time that I heard about this was I don't know. I got a notice in the mail about the meeting with P&Z. I've got 3 or 4 agents involved in different properties over here, so. I'm over here. Okay. I'm over here every week.
All right.
I have no problem coming and meeting. Some great restaurants over here and great places to eat. So I love to come.
Well, leave your number.
It's on the sheet.
Okay.
And if you'll drive up and down the street, there's signs that say.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Quine.
Thank you.
Next, Bill Journay.
Bites. Okay, I'm Bill Journay, 4529 Nadine, here in Haltom City. This program kind of reminds me of my son in Oklahoma City. This kid has diamond rings on both hands, okay? But his kitchen cabinets has pork and beans, paper plates, and peanut butter. Well, you know, a facade, this is exactly what we've seen, and this is exactly what it is. Okay? But what's the old saying Uncle Ray must say? You can hide the fire, but what you going to do about the smoke? We're going about this, I think, in reverse. Give you an example. 21 cars burned in Oak Cliff. Drive-by shootings. Road rage. Recently, we've even been asked to watch for daytime burglars. And by the way, radio and television, news media constantly reports that they haven't a clue who, if you have a clue, who, please notify your local police departments. Apparently, the cameras, the bells and whistles, the bumpers, the security devices ain't helping. When is the last time the police were any place in a neighborhood when some misbehavior took place? Probably not since the Aubrey Hawkins incident around Christmas a few years ago. And what's wrong with this picture? If you can't promise safety to present to the present population today, what are you going to do with all the much larger crowd you're trying to entice? Perhaps the media should tell us how close the nearest police officer was, if there was one out at all, out and about. And let's face it, insurance, second-rate security devices, and citizens on parole can't be responsible for enforcing our laws and keeping us safe. Nor should they. I'll bet the problem is a lack of money for proper police protection, and in which case the library, the Belknap corridor, and all these commercial properties seem to trump human lives, even safety of our children and our elderly. Yeah, pride, progression should be considered, but not at the cost of safety, freedom, and even human lives. Let's face it, jackboots and battle gear has no purpose if we can't find and catch the bad guys. I and others believe if we should ever compromise our public safety and return to our lost freedoms, people in the form of citizens, businesses would unconsciously flood our doors. But then maybe I'm forgetting something. Insurance companies could not raise their rates and enjoy their lifestyles without this adverse behavior. The insurance lobsters have government as a favorite bedfellow. Now, don't they? Don't they? If I'm wrong about this, call me up and let's talk about it. I'll bet I don't even get one call. But if I'm wrong, okay, on this circumstance, I'm buying dinner. Again, Uncle Ray must say, you can hide the fire, but what you going to do about the smoke? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jornay. Now, next I have Mr. Lou Pham. Mr. Pham, we're going to take a break about 9-ish. Okay, can you do that? I think I can. Okay, all right.
How do I turn that on?
Just push the forward side. You need to turn on the projector.
Oh, okay. It's warming up. Mr. Mayor, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, I'm Lou Pham. I work for a law firm in Fort Worth, and I have the pleasure of representing a number of the Asian businesses along the Belknap corridor. Let me first say that the business owners that I represent.
Can you speak more? Just pull it closer to you there. Yeah.
Can you hear me better?
Yeah, there you go.
We're not quite. We applaud the efforts that the city is going through. However, our concern is, and I've stated it in my past presentation to the Planning and Zoning Commission, is who's going to pay for it, number one, and number two, why would they pay for these sort of developments?
And I do have a couple of recommendations or solutions, if you will, at the end. And I can assure you, Mr. Mayor, that not doing anything is not one of those options. So hopefully I can shed some light into what my clients are looking into as a way of working with the city on this project. First of all, the Asian businesses that I represent see this as really a redevelopment of the Belknap corridor. It's not new development. We're trying to take something that's already there for the most part and redeveloping it. And in our experience, in order to successfully redevelop a corridor such as this, you really need three things. And those three things are, number one, and some of my speakers before me have already touched on this. Number one, you've got to have the infrastructure. The infrastructure has to either be in place or the city has to be willing to put money where its mouth is. We have all recently seen what our neighbors in Fort Worth have done. They passed a $150 million bond to improve their city streets. $12 million of that bond is going to improving the existing bridges on the Trinity project. And $10 million, in addition to the 12, is going into improve or to build new infrastructure. That's $22 million committed. So first of all is infrastructure, which I'm not sure we quite have in order to develop this plan. Secondly, the city needs to give developers or business owners incentives. And at this point in time, I'm sure the city's going to work something out, but the problem is there is no incentive on the table right now, and there is no infrastructure on the table right now. And thirdly, when we're looking at redevelopment, I agree, and my clients agree, that there has to be an enactment of building standards, which is what we're trying to do here today. However, without a global or holistic approach to providing incentives, what we're doing is basically telling businesses that we've got this big stick, which is the ordinance that we're trying to enact, and we got no carrot in return. So this is all stick and no carrot, or that's at least the perception that my clients see. And so it's very important that we see this as a partnering with the city, and if our clients or the Asian businesses are going to continue to invest their hard-earned dollars and their sweat into this, they want to see the city meet it in the middle as well. And I represent a number of Asian businesses along the entire corridor. However, for my limited time tonight, I want to focus on just the international corridor. That is the corridor that starts at Beach and I think ends at Layton Street. And come and share with you some of the concerns that those developers or those businesses own. One of my clients have recently purchased this property on the corner of Belknap and Layton, and which we all know is in serious need of redevelopment. They have, and I've got a couple of views of it, some of the buildings are not up to standard, and it certainly needs to be redeveloped. Their initial plan is to build something like this, where this is. As you can see, it is not 2 stories, and this development is not too shabby either. It's a 20,000 square foot development project. It's a strip shopping center with restaurants and other types of retail. Before the overlay or the smart code was enacted, this would have been perfectly fine, Mr. Mayor. However, with the requirement that there be at least 2 stories, we're running into some difficulties trying to find the financing in order to make it work. And we're also looking at frontage issues, browsing lane, and whatnot. So we're having to look at a number of different variations in order to make that work. The problem is this: if we look at it from a purely business perspective, Mr. Mayor, we're looking at it from a financial perspective. Right now, our clients have the intention of building a 20,000 square foot building. Let's look at the cost and the numbers. Let's take away what it's going to cost to demolish the 3 existing buildings. Let's not even consider the purchase or the acquisition of the land. Let's just look at the straight-up construction cost. We've looked at a number of figures, Mr. Mayor, and $110 per square foot of construction is on the low end, Mr. Mayor. In addition to that, in order to finish out the inside, we're looking at another $40 per square foot. So we're looking at $150 per square foot. and we multiply that by 20,000 square foot, this is a $3 million construction project and finish out. So what does that mean from a numbers perspective? And that is the question I'm trying to ask, and my clients are scratching their head, is why would we want to build in Belknap without the incentives and with this really big stick that's over our head right now? On a $3 million note, Mr. Mayor, the monthly payments are as follows. It's going to cost $23,000 a month to pay a $3 million note, and that's assuming a 20-year amortization at 7% interest rate. Let's not factor in insurance. Let's not even factor in the cost of maintenance. We're looking at $25,000 times 12 months. That is $300,000 a year. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I misspoke. If you add in insurance and maintenance, I'm including another $2,000 a month. Again, it's a rough estimate. You're looking at $300,000 a year. Now, in addition to that, you're also looking at triple net. I believe Mr. Quine said earlier that people are paying somewhere between 18 and up for new space. In my example of this building that's about to be built here, a 20,000 square foot building is going to cost $15 a square foot plus another $3 per square foot. That means $18 a square foot that we would have to charge our tenants in order to break even just to make our note, Mr. Mayor. And that assumes 100% occupancy, and I think that's a fairly big assumption to make. If we even boil it down to its lowest common denominator, Mr. Mayor, let's assume we have a 5,000 square foot business. Somebody wants to put in a small retail there. At 5,000 square foot times $18 a square foot, a business is looking to lease $90,000 a year, and most people are asking for 5-year leases. They're looking at investing $450,000 to rent a 5,000 square foot business for 5 years. I don't know of any business along the Belknap corridor that's getting $18 a square foot. The problem is this. In addition to this, the numbers make it very hard to digest for my clients as is. With the overlay district or the additional requirement that they build a 2-story, you got to double those numbers, Mr. Mayor. In other words, we're no longer looking at a 20,000 square foot building, we're looking at a 40,000 square foot building because the existing codes, unless we get a major waiver, requires that all buildings have to be 2 stories. In addition to that, Mr. Mayor, we're looking at a cross-section. It crosses Layton and it crosses Belknap. That becomes, I forgot the word, but it becomes a major building. I believe the word is, it becomes a feature building.
Okay, feature. Okay.
Feature building, which means there are additional requirements that you have all the bells and whistles on top of that. So we're no longer looking at a $3 million note. We're looking at a $6 million note. And we're also assuming that we can charge everybody $18 a square feet. And we all know that retailers like the first floor and they all want frontage. People don't want to stay upstairs, and if it's in the back, they're not paying premium dollars for that. So our challenge, Mr. Mayor, is given these codes or proposed codes, it is not only infeasible, it is illogical for businesses to redevelop the existing buildings there. And the businesses that I represent are Asian businesses who have been in Haltom for a long, long time. Not only have they been in business for a long, long time, their parents have been here. In some cases, their grandparents started these businesses. You've got people, and I hate to use this phrase, but if we are to enact these codes indiscriminately and not provide incentives and not provide waivers, we're basically killing the goose that lays the golden egg. We all know what the Asian corridor has done for Belknap, and there's a reason for that. Haltom has been a good place to do business for Asian business owners. However, with this code, or with this proposed code, and without any proposal for incentives or meeting in the middle, I think you're telling the businesses owners that, we're not willing to do business with y'all anymore. If you can find a better deal, take it. And I don't think that's the message, Mr. Mayor. So therefore, I basically have three proposals or three options. And as I said earlier, not doing anything isn't one of them. The first proposal that we would suggest for your consideration is to redraw the district. I'm not saying that this is the most feasible, and I'll be first to admit, if you redraw the district so that it excludes certain people, next thing you know, you're going to have a district that's about half a block long, and it doesn't do anybody any good. I think my second proposal and my third proposals have more sense than my first one. If you're going to pass the ordinance today, I would delay the effective date of the ordinance because it has really two consequences. If you want to build or develop on Belknap, you better get off the fence because we're going to have this standard that's going to be up here that's going to this costly. But the ones who are willing to put their money down now, get off the fence and develop it right now, the code doesn't apply to you. And we'll even meet you in the middle and provide incentives. I think that would get people off the fence, so to speak. And lastly, with regard to the waivers, our proposal is to waive the ordinance requirements for what I call the end posts to the international corridor. We already have I'll call one the end post, the Beach and Belknap end goal. The other one is Layton and Belknap. Those are your two goals at the end there. If you've got businesses who are willing to build and set those goals for you, let's waive it for them and hope that businesses who come in later will fill in between. I think that has the effect of basically marking your international district, the beginning and the ending, and hoping that the economy changes so that it makes sense to build. Again, at this point in time, you have to ask yourself, why would businesses put in all of this money without it when they're... We all know what's directly across the street. There are condemned motels not too far away from there. Would you put, as a business developer, a $6 million project right there, not knowing whether or not who's going to come in or who's going to go across the street and redevelop it? And that's a big concern of ours.
Sure.
The businesses that I represent want to stay in they want to continue to do business on Belknap. The message that my clients are getting through this is all stick and there's no carrot to give you an incentive to build it.
Read you loud and clear.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We're gonna, folks, it's 5:09. Some of us need to take care of biological necessities, so we're going to get about a 10-minute